I'm talking with Ethan Sperry in Portland, Oregon. He is the conductor of the Portland State Chamber Choir. They have just released on Naxos. I have had honestly the astonishing good pleasure and honor to review your CD on
Thank you so much.
Naxos. It's called The Doors of Heaven. It's the music of Ériks Esenvalds. And we'll talk. We'll talk. I'm going to let you talk. But,
Okay.
once in a while, I mean, the big mystery to me is how ordinary voices, forgive me, but you know what I mean. Your choir
Mhm.
is a collegiate choir. These people are going to pursue zillions of other careers, including maybe one or two in music. But
Mhm.
how a conductor, that's your job, brings these disparate people together to create the magic that I heard and had the privilege to review on that CD. That's the big thing I want to talk about. But I just want everybody to know the Doors of Heaven, Portland State Chamber Choir, and of course the University String Orchestra for the
Mhm.
big piece at the end. You've been at Portland State University. By the way, that campus I remember well. I'm a Northwesterner. I used to dump down to Portland every once in a while for a rehearsal of something, Oregon Light Opera or something like that. Portland State University is right in the heart of downtown Portland.
That's right. Yeah, right on the park blocks, a few blocks from the Symphony Hall and the Art Museum. It's great.
Very, very urban uh, uh, venue, if you will. And yeah, as I may have mentioned, you told me earlier, you've been there 8 years. What is it to come into a campus, cold turkey? How does one begin to shape the sound of what she has inherited in terms of previous choral programs?
Well, I'm really blessed here. We have a lot of music majors, and the choir you're listening to, most of them are hoping for careers in music. Some is vocal performance. We have a wonderful opera program. We're the only university in the Northwest that still does a full opera every year with a full orchestra set, costumes, the real deal. And then, even more so, we have students that are looking for future careers as choir directors or music teachers, whether that's elementary school or high school choir directors. And we also have graduate students in conducting, so people who are actually studying conducting with me. So, most of the choir is actually music majors, and that's what they're hoping for. A couple of composers, pianists, but it is a room full of people with a lot of musical skills, which is very exciting.
Well,
And then,
you have just corrected me
yeah,
greatly. I guess
yeah,
my memories are from quite a while ago, but I had no idea
yeah,
that the music program was that strong and had that
yeah.
many
No, we
music
are the
majors.
largest. We are the largest in the Northwest of the United States right now. So
Amazing. Well, no wonder the sound
it's
that I heard. No
yeah,
wonder.
no, and they worked very hard.
Yeah.
I think there is the sense we at least try to teach it. You're at Portland State. You're not at Juilliard. You're going to have to work even harder to develop the skill set. You're not going to be able to just ride on our name. You need to ride on your skills. And so I work the group very, very hard. And one of the reasons I've believed in doing recording sessions is it is a wonderful pre-professional experience. And I've been lucky to have these amazing people like my producer Eric Light and our engineer John Atkinson, who are top flight people who are willing to come in and work with the students and push them just like they were the professionals and give them that experience. It's about as good training as I can give them.
Yeah. And by the way, there's nothing they want more.
That's right.
If they're serious
Yeah.
music majors, they want to be
Hmm.
pushed and pushed. They need to because we
Hmm.
know it's a very hard world out there. Once you get shoved out into it, it's
Oh,
very,
yeah.
very tough. So, congratulations and thank you for standing me corrected about Portland State
You
University.
got it.
And I couldn't be more thrilled to be to hear that you have such a dynamic music department. It's
Yeah.
fabulous. Okay. Now
Yeah.
let's
But to answer your original question, like working with the singers, I mean, a
yeah.
lot of them have very large voices and very distinctive voices, which is why that's successful. Trying to turn that into a choir can be very challenging, getting them to have unified vowel concepts, matching vibratos. And as you mentioned, the way we recorded the CD, we are miking them quite closely. We are not doing the traditional choir thing, which is the choir's on stage, the microphones are in the audience. We're really trying to generate the conductor's perspective, like you're standing in the midst of the choir. The microphones are placed very close to where I would stand, and the choir's in a U shape, not in a straight line. So there are singers singing at the microphones from a 180-degree perspective. And it's one of the things I really love about this disc is that feeling that you're standing in the middle of the choir. But that's much more challenging. Choirs usually rely on distance from the audience to get that blended sound. And in this one, each choir member is standing just a few feet away from the microphone, and that requires real precision on their parts. It's a real push on their listening skills, not just their vocal skills.
Yes, and you mentioned blend. Incredible blend, beautiful homogeneity of sound, and you've just described how exposed, if you will, in terms of this recording circumstance it is. How absolutely stunning. How about, you mentioned, we talked some weeks ago, you mentioned the acoustics in this particular church that you used for the recording.
Yeah.
And tell me a little bit about how you manipulated, if you will, the space, how you used various corners of the space for this recording.
Well, that's been my most exciting thing. A lot of recording engineers love to record choirs in a very dry room so that they can get a very clean sound and then add reverb and other effects later. The church where we record has a magical reverberant space, St. Stephen's Catholic Church in Southeast Portland. Most churches that have an echo, the echo distorts the pitch. It either shimmers usually sharp or the pitch sort of comes apart. And St. Stephen's, the sound hangs in the air exactly like you sang it for about 2 seconds after you cut off. There's no change. It's like the perfect listening tool for the choir. That's what it sounded like. It's not like it makes it any better. It just replicates it right back at you. So for a choral singer, they can really hear and adjust accordingly. And I'm so glad I worked with a recording team that's willing to really be interested in capturing live sound, not using tricks afterwards.
Yes.
And then trying to use the room to the best possible advantage. So our engineer, John Atkinson, is going around with a tape measure, making sure literally that every singer in the front row is exactly the same distance from the microphone. And second row, same thing. And he knows that microphones like higher voices, so the sopranos and tenors with the higher voices need to be in the back row, and the altos and basses with the lower voices need to be in the front row. And
amazing.
Sometimes if there's specific lines we want to have emphasized, or in the Esenvalds case, there's so many ethereal textures he's creating where so many people are sort of singing background parts on syllables, ahs and oohs, and other people are singing melodies that we sometimes had people turn away from the microphone, maybe a quarter turn away, and sometimes even singing facing backwards, which also created some amazing effects off the back wall of the church. So again, it's all real sounds, but I work with real geniuses who've got creative thoughts about how we can use the space to create things live rather than faking it up afterwards or editing it up afterwards.
And believe me, by the way, my review's up at performingartsreview.net. I hope people will go up and have a look at it and purchase the CD. As I have mentioned to you a couple of times, my system ceased to function for a while. I was in a state of ecstasy, I think. Let's talk about the repertoire.
Yeah, well, I'm glad to hear you say that, because the first time I encountered Ériks's music, that's how I felt too.
And it's not a faux ecstasy, it's like something. This man has the capacity to capture what, how it is in music, and it's activation on the brain and certain centers in the brain. I was captivated and mesmerized and wept, I'll tell you quite openly. And that's about the level of this performance, but also this incredible man and his compositional skills. It's tremendous. What do you say we start with the first tears, or do you have anything else you'd like to speak about first?
Sure. Well, I guess I'd start with A Drop in the Ocean, just because it's the piece of his that I first heard.
Okay, good.
And I'm a junkie for the American Choral Directors Association, for ACDA, and they do these. It's the largest organization in the world devoted to choral music, and they do a national conference every 2 years. And I started going in 1993, and I go to all of them, and I can track so many amazing experiences I've had just at these conferences. And in 2011, this young choir from Latvia called Kepl came and sang at the conference, and they sang A Drop in the Ocean by Ériks Esenvalds, and just my life changed right there, just like sitting in the front row of the balcony in Orchestra Hall in Chicago. I'll never forget it. And I needed to suddenly find out everything he had done, and I encountered his oratorio, Passion and Resurrection. And I emailed him in Latvia saying, I'm going to do this with my adult choir, with the Oregon Repertory Singers. Would you come for the performance? And he said he would love to. Nobody in America had ever asked him to come to America to hear his music before. And so that was in 2013. And at the same time, I asked him if he'd write a piece for my chamber choir. And he said he would. He wrote us a beautiful short piece called The Heaven's Flock, which we actually released on a previous album of ours that was not on a label. We've done 3 prior albums with my same recording team, just sort of self-produced. And then a few years later, in 2015, we were asked to host the National Collegiate Choir Conference in Portland, just for college choir directors. And I thought, boy, what I want to do is the Esenvalds Passion and Resurrection. I think that's the best piece that's been written this millennia. And I think every college choir director in the country needs to hear this piece. And we decided we were going to record it after that. But at that concert, there was a rep from Naxos there And they approached Ériks Esenvalds after the concert and said, we want to get a recording of Passion and Resurrection on Naxos. And Ériks said, great, you should use the Portland State Chamber Choir. And they're like, no, 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 we want a professional recording. And they assumed he would go with one of the professional British or Latvian choirs. And he said, no, you need to have the Portland State Chamber Choir record the CD. And so we had planned to record the Esenvalds along with a series of other Russian pieces that I feel like are sort of its theological predecessors, music of the communist era that led to his sort of post-communist take on religion. And Naxos said, nope, we only do single composer discs. That's going to bring much more attention. That's going to get much more acclaim. So we recorded Passion and Resurrection in January and then spent the rest of the year learning the rest of those pieces that are on the album. And the First Tears was brand new at that time. Only one choir, only the Latvian radio choir had ever performed it before. So we were the second choir in the world to tackle that piece. It's still the hardest piece I've ever tried to teach a choir. It's it's really insane, but worth every minute. It's really stunning.
The imagery, the compositional construction, everything about that piece is the match of sound, emotion to word is absolutely stunning.
And I think that's his unique gift. Well, he has many. The vertical sounds he writes are amazing, but the two things that I think really help him stand out, so much choral music is static. It's prayers. It's, just it's images. And his is dramatic. It is narrative. Everything tells a story and tells it with just like full-on dramatic imagery. He does not shy away from non-pretty images. A lot of modern choral music is just beautiful. And his music at its best is just as beautiful. But I think it's even more beautiful when it's juxtaposed with many of the more angular and edgy sounds.
Yes.
And in both Passion and Resurrection and Drop in the Ocean, you have these tremendous moments of pain and anguish. And when they release into the beauty that he's able to write, it's so much more powerful than if you just heard the beautiful music by itself.
Absolutely.
And a lot of things that his 20th century predecessors, well, we're going to write, aleatoric sounds or yelling because that's what everybody is doing. And we use weird sounds. Like everything he does serves the text. Every time he uses one of those expanded techniques, it's to tell the drama in the story. It never seems gimmicky. It always seems directly in service of the narrative.
You have just exactly described my experience and for me, because it's hard to, as I mentioned just a bit ago, this matching of sound, if you will, compositional sound and imagery and mood with the text. It's extraordinary with this man. Can I use that as a segue to do Rivers of Light? Because I could see it. I sat in a darkened room and it's just exploded in my face. I just loved that piece. Tell me about it.
Yeah. So Ériks got obsessed with it. Well, he grew up in Latvia where they see the Northern Lights all the time. And actually when they see them in the sky, legend would have it's an omen of war.
Oh, really?
But most of our cultures that don't see them very often, anyone who encounters it for the first time is like, this is the most beautiful thing I've ever seen in my life. And to think that like one culture sees it as the most beautiful thing they've ever seen and another culture sees it as a sign of war. He got obsessed with how do all these cultures see the Northern Lights, and he traveled around the world interviewing all these tribal elders from all these cultures. And in Rivers of Light, he's using these British explorers journals of these British explorers with this flowery language. Yeah, that's where the title of the album comes from, that somebody sees the Northern Lights and says, the doors of heaven have been opened tonight.
Which is lovely, by the way.
Yeah, it's an amazing turn of phrase. There are so many amazing phrases in that piece. Like the dying embers of a great fire, that's up in the sky.
And the dragon, something I don't have the text to hand, but the dragon image.
Yeah, the dragon's shimmering through the sky, and it's so fantastic. And he sets all these images to music. And to me, the music of the natural beauty and the music of the religious ecstasy in the other pieces are related. That, like so many of us here in the Pacific Northwest, he finds the divine and natural beauty as well, and a very similar beauty to where he finds the religious beauty in those pieces as well, that there's something in sync about those two, which is why even though you have this album of two pieces about natural phenomena and two pieces about religious ecstasy, you find this common thread musically that seems to make sense for both texts. And I think a lot of human beings would sympathize with that.
Yeah, and exactly so. Exactly so, by the way. I mentioned this animist and religion, this animism and religion. seemingly not able to come together. And of
Yeah.
course, it's the whole secret of how mankind lives
Yeah.
on this planet.
I wrote in the program notes to the CD that tonal music, to me, the 18th and 19th century classical, romantic, even Baroque, is the music of things that make sense to us. Major chords and minor chords might be the music of lines and circles and squares and shapes we can comprehend. And I find Ériks's music for our time to be even more beautiful, even though it's not major and minor chords. It's not things that should sound as good. To me, it's possible to me, I wrote this in the notes, that he's found the chord progression of the Fibonacci sequence.
You mentioned this,
Of the spiral or the nautilus, the things that sort of go on endlessly, that like his is not a comprehensible shape any more than those natural shapes are, or a religious image to us. It's not something that can be fully grasped by the brain. And so he's written something to me that, as you said, is ecstatically beautiful. It's outside of our comprehension. Whereas major chords are very beautiful, but they are well within our comprehension.
Did I mention this guy has a PhD from USC? I mean, this is the beauty of high intellect, frankly, and helping people to understand there's a whole lot more to this art form than may first. And the public, I think, is sucked, even though they may not realize it, into Esenvalds' music. He has discovered something.
Yeah, everybody that we've performed it for, and we have had a piece of his in our repertoire now for 8 years running, and every concert, it's always his music that people respond to the most. And I think it is that universal, including, moms and dads of college students that don't quite get why their kid is so into choir and are not, like that it's their first, exposure. It speaks to them just as easily as it speaks to the most educated musical listener like you.
Yeah, even those clusters.
Especially
and
those
dissonances that dissonance and resolution, that's perfectly obvious, but somehow he embraces these clusters in a way that people can also involve their minds and their intellects and their emotions. It's beautiful. Well, what's up next?
What is up next is we are hoping to do a follow-up album. We're hoping that he's going to write us a second larger work for us. He's never written a large work for us, so hopefully that will be on the next CD. And then we'll see. There's a couple other people that we're pursuing as well, but I don't think I'm done with my Esenvalds phase yet. And I mean, he's become a really wonderful friend.
And I don't think he's done with us. I mean, humanity.
No, and he's only 41 years old. So
amazing.
There's a long way to go, I think, for him. So.
Ethan Sperry, thank you very, very much for having a little chat with me at the end of your day up there in Portland. We are discussing a Naxos release. It's the Portland State Chamber Choir, Ethan Sperry conducting, The Doors of Heaven, music of Ériks Esenvalds. Absolutely extraordinary. Have a look at Amazon. Portland State Chamber Choir is bound to pop up. You grab this album, and I say grab it. It's going to be a magical piece of your collection, and I'm not just trying to sell CDs. It's as a musician speaking here, and I can't wait for the next release. And what an astonishing achievement you have had at your home base there at Portland State University. Fabulous. Those students are very, very lucky to have you. It's incredible. Thanks, Ethan.
Thank you. Take care, Daniel.
We're done.